Oh, and you won't have to turn on your mics. They're already on. The folks over there will kind of come in and out, that sort of thing. All right? All right, good. We're good to go? Welcome. Good evening, everybody. I'm Adam Gromas. I lead global sustainability policy at Uber, and I am so pleased and honored to be joined by a remarkable panel of experts on two and three wheel electrification. If you're anything like me, earlier this year, when I was sitting in the west coast of the United States, where there aren't a lot of things that move on two and three wheels unless you're a bike or an e-bike, which is what I like to move my children around in the city of Oakland where I live, I'm not thinking that half the world or more moves on two and three wheels all over the place. And so when Bloomberg launched their EV Outlook report earlier this year and suggested that half of every electric vehicle that had been sold in the last year was on two and three wheels, I was really struck. And then when they said that all of the electric two and three wheels vehicles that are out in the world today are displacing 3.5 times the oil that four-wheel electric vehicles are displacing, I fell out of my chair. And I realized how much I didn't know. I asked our folks at Uber, because Uber, a couple years ago, we launched an Uber Eats service, which became popular during COVID. And we also launched a Moto product. Push a button, someone shows up with a motorcycle, hands you a helmet, you hop on the back, and away you go. Nowadays, we have hundreds of thousands of trips occurring on two and three wheels every year on Uber. And we realized we have a lot of work to do to catch up on electrification because we've made a commitment to 100% electrification across Uber by 2040 globally. And there's a lot of two and three wheel things that we don't know much about that we have to get smart on. And getting smart means talking to people a lot smarter than us. So I'm so pleased to have our panel. So let me introduce them. Sitting next to me, Rajal Upadhyay, who is the CFO for Roam, an electric two and three wheel provider in East Africa. Thank you so much for being with us, Rajal. Sitting next to Rajal is Rob DeYoung. Rob is the head of the Sustainable Mobility at UNEP, at the UN's Environment Program. We're so glad to have you here, Rob. Thank you for being here. Also based in Nairobi. Is that right, Rob?
Also based in Nairobi, yes.
Excellent. East Africa, well represented on this panel. Thank you. And sitting next to Rob, of course, is Anjali Mahendra from the World Resources Institute. And Anjali is the Director of Global Research and leads the Cities program at WRI. And in fact, I'm going to hand it over to Anjali to lay a bit of the groundwork, a lay of the land for especially those like me that don't know much about the two and three wheel space around the world. Anjali.
Thank you so much, Adam. Really happy to be here. And this is a topic that's really close to my heart because actually I might show you some slides from work done 10 years ago at WRI in India and 20 years ago as a graduate student. So forget the fact that it's old data. That kind of data still doesn't exist today. So we really need more research in this area. And coming from, just the position I'm in of leading research, I think this is a topic that is ripe for research, ripe for action. The action doesn't happen without the basic data and the research. So I'm really happy you're having this session. And I'm just gonna follow the suggestion, Adam made to me as he was just saying, try to sketch out what the kind of market is, the opportunity is, what the emissions reduction opportunity is, but broadly the sustainability opportunity of two and three wheelers, right? So with that, if I can get this to work. Oh, there you go. All right. So Adam already alluded to this, right? It's two and three wheelers represent a really large VKT share, that's vehicle kilometers traveled in growing countries. And by that I mean, think of the rapidly urbanizing regions of the world, think of South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia. This is just some data we pulled together from the World Bank, relatively recent data, looking at the share of VKT and the bluish, light blue colored bars, the orange bars, that basically is the amount that's represented by two and three wheelers. And so you see Nepal, Vietnam, India, Cambodia. This is a very, very widely used mode both of these, two and three-wheelers in South and Southeast Asia, but also growing in Africa. I'm sure you'll hear about that from Rajal. But also with the delivery companies, as you were saying, Adam, Uber Eats, and a lot of the COVID-related deliveries that we're seeing with the e-commerce industry. I mean, you've seen just a lot more of that in Latin America as well. So I guess, yeah, this speaks for itself. Very huge extents of vehicle kilometers traveled in some of those Asian and African countries. I thought I'd just put some pictures out there as well. Streetscapes, the top left is basically a couple of pictures from Indian cities. The bottom one is one where we actually did research in the city of Pune, your standard mid-sized city in India where there is heavy usage of two-wheelers. The black and yellow are the auto rickshaws, as we call them in India. The right side is a picture from Taiwan. Again, just massive mode share that's covered up by two-wheelers. And then this is where the top left is work from 20 years ago, and that's really just to make the point about why are you seeing this massive market share of two and three-wheelers? It is because in the absence of decent, reliable public transportation, for people below a certain income threshold who cannot afford private vehicles or cars, the only option available is a two-wheeler or a three-wheeler. And a three-wheeler is, where you hail a ride, and I mean, the old ride-hailing before, Ubers and so on existed. Two-wheelers are, of course, how you get place to place in the absence of your own, car or public transportation. And more importantly, in a growing city. That's why I kind of made the point at the beginning about growing cities. These are all cities where because of the urban population growth and, minimal planning, you're seeing sprawl. You're seeing it everywhere, but you're particularly seeing it in these places. And so you're just seeing expanding cities, destinations becoming further and further from homes. You need a mode of transport. And those curves really are just an interesting study we had done looking at what we call S-curves. You could plot today's income data against percentage of households that own and use two-wheelers and cars, and it just shows you, the slower curve there is cars, and the curve that begins at a lower income level is motorcycles, just to say, of course, that's happening at a much lower income threshold. Some interesting pictures here of just how much value these modes provide in these places in terms of providing that access to get around. You see whole families, right? You see families of 5 and 4 people on these two-wheelers. It is their basic mode of transportation, come what weather, right? And then, of course, the three-wheelers that I have there, it's a major source of access. It's a source of livelihoods. Think about all the migrants that come into cities. Many of these cities with limited skills and education, one of the first jobs they do is lease out one of these vehicles and start operating it on the streets. And so auto rickshaws are tuk-tuks, whether it's matatus in Nairobi, that's kind of the model. And then on the top right there is the delivery market run by two-wheelers, which is just expanding exponentially in some of these cities. Just a couple of pieces of research that we've been doing at WRI, but that's old work. I mean, I just really wanted to say this is still an under-researched area. So what I picked up actually there in terms of numbers is a World Economic Forum report that came out in 2022 in collaboration with Niti Aayog, which is like the planning body in India. And just those numbers are very interesting and they're new, so I thought I'd put them up there. This is just looking at India, which has the largest two- and three-wheeler fleet in the world today. About 80% of the vehicle fleet is represented by two- and three-wheelers. Roughly 70 to 75% of that is two-wheelers and about 5 to 10% three-wheelers. It's 250 million of them on the streets. And today, only 1 million of annual sales are electrified two- and three-wheelers. So that gives you a sense of the size of the market in that one country. Yes, it's a massive country, but massive scale of electrification possible. And that was an interesting fact just around finance, that achieving 100% electrification of India's two- and three-wheeler stock, says the World Economic Forum, requires a capital allocation of approximately $285 billion. I'm not the finance person who does these analyses, but I'm sure there's some truth to that. And this is where maybe I'll just leave it and segue to the next speaker. But I wanted to highlight that this is not just, this whole electrification opportunity is not just an emissions reduction opportunity. It is an opportunity to reduce emissions, of course, but to improve the vehicles. Today, they run, many of them, on two-stroke engines, some of them, of course, still on gasoline. There's been changes to compressed natural gas in some markets like India, but there is still fossil fuel transport happening there. So improving the vehicles, improving accessibility for the user, improving the quality of service, and improving the livelihoods of the operators. This is all of that packaged into this opportunity. Second point there is that any innovation that happens in this market needs to focus on affordability, because today the big challenge is the upfront cost of buying that vehicle for many of these operators. And of course, that innovation needs to happen in an ecosystem where regulations are sort of set properly, standards are set in all ways. And then there's a lot one can say on policy. Maybe we'll get into that in the discussion. So I just want to say, in some of our work that we've been doing in Kenya and India and places like that, there needs to be a whole set of policies that enable adoption of more electric vehicles in this market. We have found in places like Vietnam, where we work, that working with national governments and local governments together to create these national electrification roadmaps so that you can start to plan the scale of investment, the scale of vehicles needed, work with suppliers and manufacturers, create the charging infrastructure. This all needs to be planned. And so we kind of work on this idea of electrification roadmaps at the national level. You need technical assistance, of course, because once these vehicles start running on cities' roads, there needs to be collaboration between transportation and utility agencies. You need better integration of how these vehicles fit in with the other modes operating in cities for last mile access and so on. And then last, but certainly not the least, the financing piece is super important. You need subsidies, affordable loans for operators to be able to really finance those. Today, I've heard of numbers like 20 to 40% of a down payment needs to be made on these vehicles in some African countries, and you have 18 months to pay up the rest. An operator working at a daily wage where they lease the vehicle, they run their trips, is simply not able to make that work. So I'll stop there. I've kind of just laid out the market and the challenges, and hope all the solutions will come from you guys.
I'm so grateful, Anjali, for you taking the time to educate us. Thank you for sharing your work on this. And quite frankly, if I could just get a reaction from you, $250 billion to pay for the conversion for 2 and 3 wheels, that's not, compared to 4 wheels, that's probably a bargain. And to think that that's an investment in the livelihoods of so many people, if we were to compare it to other modes across the transport sector, I doubt you'd be hard-pressed to find a better investment. And that's an attainable investment, don't you think?
If and only if the mindset of people who are measuring the returns from that investment is such that it takes into account the livelihood benefits, it takes into account the accessibility benefit in the city, not just and we tend to do this a lot in the climate world, and with climate finance projects, just trying to measure the emissions reduction. There's all these co-benefits which often go unmeasured. And the only way people will see it the way you're talking about it, as a major investment in economic investment, well-being, accessibility in the city, productivity of the city, is if you actually start valuing all those benefits, right?
We can't forget in the people while we pursue the figures. That's so true. I'm going to ask you, come back to you, Anjali, on a memorable 2 or 3 wheel trip that you've taken. So think about it. I'll come back to you on it. It's coming, guys. So a couple of months ago, when I realized how much I didn't know about electrification for 2 and 3 wheels, as I often do, I went to the Climate Works Foundation folks who know a lot about reducing emissions from transport. And I asked a friend of mine, Anthony Agert, who's quite smart about transportation policy. And I said, hey, who do you know in the 2 or 3 wheel space that's working on electrification? And he said, you got to talk to Rob de Jong. I said, who's that? And he said, well, he lives in Nairobi, works for the UNEP. The UNEP, I said. What's the UNEP doing on electrification? So, Rob, as you reflect on this opportunity, it's not obvious that the UNEP would be involved in electrification of 2 and 3 wheels. But are you seeing the same opportunity that Anjali is seeing Can you help us define this from an environmental programs perspective?
Yeah, thank you, Adam, and thank you for inviting me today here. Um, we, the world is going to add a billion vehicles to the global fleet between now and 2050. And all of those vehicles largely will be added in low and middle-income countries. And so if we want to achieve the Paris Climate Agreement, we need a global approach to electrification. If we only electrify the global north and we send the old vehicles that are then left over to the global south to run around for another 20 years, we will not get the emission reductions we need. That means we need a global approach to electrification. That means we need to look at how does the world move? Because we need to electrify not only four-wheelers, but we need to electrify how the world moves. And how the world moves in New York is different from how the world moves in Nairobi. In Kenya, there's more motorcycles than there are cars. In India, I guess it's the same. And so we also need to electrify those modes. We need to electrify those modes to meet the global targets. We need to electrify two and three-wheelers to meet the Paris Climate Agreement. It's very simple. And the good news is, the smaller the battery, the smaller the cost difference, the easier it is. So we call electrifying two and three-wheelers the low-hanging fruit of electric mobility. My program at the United Nations Environment Programme supports more than 60 countries around the world, in the global south largely, 60, 70 country projects now in low middle income countries with going to electric mobility. Majority of them are two and three-wheeler projects. So there's a lot of interest, a lot of appetite, but a lot of opportunity also to start electrifying two and three-wheelers. Actually, both from a cost perspective and from an environment perspective, we really should not be adding any more two-wheelers that emit. This is not only, as Anjali said, because of climate, but it's also because of air pollution. Those two-wheelers are relatively very polluting. Sometimes they pollute more than a private car. And so also to protect the air quality in our cities, and specifically in the booming cities in the global south, we need to leapfrog. The third reason is it's cheaper to go to electric two and three-wheelers. We did a study in East Africa where we estimate that an operator, and in East Africa most of those motorcycles are used for taxis, an operator, give or take, makes $10 a day take away as a motorcycle taxi operator. With an electric motorcycle, this person would earn somewhere around $15, $16, $17 a day. So this is a pro-poor development policy. So why is it not happening? Well, and I'll end there, but why is it not happening? The motorcycle taxi operator, as you said, needs to bring $500 to the bank to get another loan for $600 or $700 to buy a motorcycle of $1,200. So when that person goes to the bank with their $500, which they've been lending from their family, and says, I'm starting my motorcycle taxi business, can you give me a loan? They give him $700. If he says, give me a loan for an electric motorcycle, I'd need $200 or $300 more, the bank says, what are you talking about? $200 or $300 more. We're not going to give you a loan for $200 or $300 more. We're not going to take that risk that you won't pay back that extra. Why should we give you $200 or $300 more? Well, I will double my income. I will save the environment. The bank says, everybody gets $700, you get $700. So that's the problem. It is economically viable, but we need to find a way to finance it. Not to subsidize it, to finance it. We can talk more about that.
Financing came up heavy in your recommendations, Anjali, for the solution set. We need to return to that idea. And Rob, do I hear you right that there's kind of a two-dimensional solution set here? One is, how do we help growing economies avoid some of the four-wheel vehicle reliance that we've seen set in, say, global north economies? Because once you've done that, once you're on, say, a U.S. path of car ownership, you have so many big things to then pay for to electrify. that transitional cost is so high. The barriers get higher and higher as households shift to four-wheeled vehicles. In fact, even now, I was talking to the ICCT folks yesterday. They were saying the next horizon is weight. There's so many huge four-wheel, even electric things that the weight of it has a substantial cost to roads, to particulates from tires, from brake pads. So now they're looking to go back towards what you're talking about. So that's dimension one. And then, of course, the second dimension is electrification, which is not just a climate play, but a local criteria pollutant play, which is so important to human health in so many of these cities. Are we capturing that right? Is that the way you're thinking about it?
Yes, that's correct. So increasingly, we have small particulate pollution. If you look at the latest data, they're talking about 6 million premature deaths per year because of fossil fuel emissions. So large shares coming from the transport sector burning those fossil fuels. So we're talking about millions of premature deaths every year. We're talking about us losing months, if not years, of our lifetime because of the fact that we use fossil fuels for our transportation needs. So this is, for many developing countries, even more important even than climate change. The air quality. And the air quality has a direct link to economic activity. We can see it in Asian cities that have invested massively to get their air quality improved. We want those cities to leapfrog and avoid that. And that's going to save them a lot of money if they do it now. So there's a keen economic issue also for governments.
We need to figure out a way to price in those benefits in a way so that the financing system can respond to it as well. And then at the individual user level, be able to de-risk or provide more tools for financing to be able to de-risk those individuals whose livelihoods are about to improve. The difference between the 700 for the ICE vehicle or the 1,200 for the EV could be substantial in terms of what it means for them. So let's talk more about that. So I'm going to come to Rajal next because this all sounds great, but I imagine it's easier said than done. So tell us about Roam and selling electric two-wheelers in East Africa. And if you would, enlighten us on what are some of the key barriers that you run into that prevent you from growing?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Roam is electric vehicle ecosystem player. So we design and develop two-wheelers and buses, four-wheelers. We manufacture them on the ground in Kenya, and we provide the supporting infrastructure, charging infrastructure, after-sales services, and technology. Within that, and I'll talk more about it, is one of the challenges of operating in the environment we're doing. But we also recognized, and Anjali, Rob, you've done a phenomenal job setting the scene for the challenges and the problems, because we also recognized in terms of impact, the bar chart you showed, Anjali, a lot of the bars, a lot of the weightage was in the light blue and the dark orange, which is the two-wheelers and the buses, right? Those are the most prevalent forms of transportation in the markets we operate in. In Nairobi alone, 4 million journeys a day using motorcycles or buses. Getting this right has a very significant impact. But coming to what you raised with regards to the challenges, a lot of the innovation, a lot of the transportation services are private sector led, right? 90% plus of transportation in Kenya, in sub-Saharan Africa, is not provided by the government, it's provided by the private sector, including buses. The implication of this is, in order to make this sustainable, in order to accelerate the scale up, it has to provide a financial, commercial return on investment. That's a challenge and an opportunity, Adam. The challenge is getting, as we've spoken about, Rob, getting the economics right to factor this in and getting the financing right. The opportunity is, once you are able to create that, then it's not reliant on subsidies. It's reliant on a mechanism that's been tried and tested for centuries on a suitable incentive to scale up rapidly without as much external considerations to rely on. So coming back to answer your question more directly, the challenges we've found are threefold. One is getting the financing right. That's at two levels. Financing for us as an operator, it's a new technology in a difficult environment. As a startup, with a relatively shallow financial market, right? We don't have collateral, we don't have cash flows, we're designing the vehicle ourselves. Unlike the global north, where there is greater segmentation in the business, one of the reasons we do what we did, operate across the value chain, is because we have to. In order to make this successful, we have to provide the charging infrastructure, we have to provide the after sales, we have to provide the underlying technology. We can't focus on one aspect of that value chain, we have to do it all, which means we need suitable funding to be able to do it on. The second one is what Rob so eloquently talked about, which is financing for the end user. Unless you get the end user appropriate financing mechanisms, innovative financing mechanisms, then that transition, that shift to electrification becomes significantly harder. So that's one. And then the second big challenge is in execution. It's exactly what you said, getting the supply chain working, getting sufficient components in good time, to actually manufacture and assemble on the ground is a massive challenge. And then the third is the right policy environment. Thankfully enough, in a lot of the markets we operate in, this is actually not just good for, we said it, it's not just good for the environment, it's good for livelihoods, it's good for public health, and it's good for the macroeconomic situations in a lot of the countries. If I talk about Kenya alone, we import $500 million worth of petroleum every single month, which is a negative balance of payments deficits. We generate more electricity than we consume. 92% of our energy is renewable. Overnight, electricity consumption, the off-peak hours, it drops down significantly. We're an off-taker for off-peak consumption, which makes the whole equation that much more attractive for the utilities, for the government, for other energy consumers. So there's a lot in it to get right. And thankfully enough, we do get a lot of government support from the policy side of the equation.
Really remarkable, Rajal. And so financing both at the operator and at the user level, operations and execution, it's easier said than done. And then of course policy, and you mentioned a lot of these areas. Now, both Rome and this panel are lucky to have you, Rajal, because you have a background in private equity. You're a finance guy. That's helpful. First, you told me a great story beforehand about how you came into this space. I would love it if you would be willing to share even a portion of it. But then talk about some of the innovations you found for financing, or what solutions you're finding on the financing side.
No, thanks, Adam. I was an investor investing in East African markets. I had what I, with hindsight, look upon as the rare privilege of being able to take some time off in my career. So I went on a career break early last year, and ended up being a far longer career break than I expected it to, because I was enjoying it far too much. And as tends to be the case, I was having dinner with my teenage son one evening, and, you know, a typical father-son conversation, but with roles reversed, where my son looks me in the eye and says, "So Dad, what do you want to do with your life now?" And that led to a philosophical conversation about wanting to have as much impact as, you know, a financial livelihood. And with slightly less polite words than I will use, he said, "Well, your generation has messed up the world. So if you want to do something, then correct that and try and figure out the climate solution," which is what led me to join Rome, Adam, and be as passionate about doing what we're trying to do as my colleagues at Rome are. In terms of answering your question, I think I'll say three things, right? And they all speak to what Rob and Anjali alluded to. First is functionality, second's affordability, and third's flexibility. Functionality, electric motorcycles, Rob said this, 80% of the use case in sub-Saharan Africa is a commercial use case, right? This is a productive asset. Livelihoods depend on your motorcycle being able to do what it has to do in the environment it has to operate in. So ROM, like a lot of other participants, took electric motorcycles built for a different use case, and they did not work in our environment. They couldn't carry 250 kilograms, bags of potatoes, sacks of potatoes, cement. At times, you get all these remarkable photographs of an electric motorcycle with 2 cows or chicken strapped to the back. These are productive commercial assets that go through rough use. The average distance covered on a daily basis by a motorcycle operator in Nairobi is between 100 to 120 kilometers on average. And you have riders covering significantly
day.
more than that every single day.
Wow.
So the bike has to work. So Rom took the approach of designing a bike on the grounds. We spent 3 years developing a motorcycle for that use case. The second is affordability. It has to be affordable to the end user. A lot of the end consumers in sub-Saharan Africa are not going to shift to electric motorcycles because it's good for the environment. They don't have that luxury. They're going to shift to electric motorcycles if it saves them money and takes home from $10 to $15 a day. That is a massive transition. So it has to be
Which is
affordable.
not just a 1 year or 2 year total cost of ownership equation. It's a weekly, daily cash flow equation, which is so critical. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
So any motorcycle consumer in Nairobi that shifts from an ICE bike to one of our bikes, 80% of motorcycles are financed by asset financiers over a 12, 18, 24-month period on a daily basis, including the higher capital cost, but factoring in the significantly lower operating costs of electricity versus diesel versus petroleum, today would save anywhere from 10 to 20%, depending on the utilization. Today, we can sell thousands of bikes. Through a lot of consumer surveys, when we get to a saving of between 25 to 30%, that effectively doubles your take-home impact and is an excellent motivator to transition. That gives the consumer information, and then we can sell. Every new bike sold will be electric at that point in time, because that's a powerful motivator. And then very quickly, the third point is flexibility. We have to catch up on infrastructure, on charging infrastructure in particular, on after sales and technology. So developing a product that gives the end user, we have, let me give you a real example. We have one of our motorcycle taxi operators whose family is in Nakuru, which is a town roughly 140 kilometers, 150 kilometers from Nairobi. And he operates as a commercial micro-entrepreneur in Nairobi. Every other weekend, he needs to go home to see his parents. And his conversation with us was, I like your bike because I can buy it and I can charge it wherever I am. You can charge it wherever you can charge a mobile phone, which means he doesn't have to pay bus fare to take the bus every other weekend to Nakuru, but can simply rent a second battery from us, ride all the way to Nakuru, charge it, and ride back. So giving them a product that gives them flexibility means the uptake is greater, right? So try and not changing consumer patterns of consumption. So don't change anything except change it from a fossil fuel to electric vehicle. That's what we're trying to do.
Functionality, affordability, flexibility, keys to success on the financing side. There was something you said earlier, which I want to make sure that I capture, which is this is a big opportunity for, say, a growing economy like in Kenya to then onshore manufacturing of these vehicles. It may not be so simple to onshore manufacturing, say, of passenger cars, but for a 2- and 3-wheel vehicle, this is a massive economic opportunity, job creator locally, if we get that balance right in these key conditions. So let's talk about, we've just got about 5 to 10 minutes left. Let's talk about some of the bright spots. Let's talk about some of the solutions. Earlier this year, Uber was able to launch its first ever electric Moto product. We operate Moto around the world, where a 2- and 3-wheel vehicle shows up at the push of a button. The driver hands you a helmet, you hop on the back and hold on tight. And we launched an all-electric product below cost, price just below our standard Boda Boda product in Nairobi, thanks to Rome and several other suppliers who were working with a company called Green Wheels that we engaged, and then were able to bring their fleet of drivers and electric 2-wheel vehicles and battery swap solutions, which are so critical, to bear. We haven't touched much upon it, and I would love to hear from the panel what you're seeing, but battery swap seems so critical to all of these things that we mentioned were challenges, because then you take the cost of the battery away, turn that into a service, You mentioned renting 2 batteries to the driver being so critical, but those key ingredients came together so we can, for the first time, offer this all-electric service in Nairobi, which seems to work so well. What other types of pilots or opportunities are you seeing? What's working? What are the solutions? Anjali, do you mind if I come over to you?
Yeah, sure. So out of the UK, there's this Ashton Foundation that gives out an International Sustainable Mobility Award. And for some years, I had the honor of being on their jury. And the amount of innovation that I saw in terms of entries coming into that International Sustainable Mobility Award in this market area, and not just in these countries that we're talking about, all over Europe, for deliveries, last mile freight deliveries within cities, because now so many cities have low emission zones. You can't drive some of the larger vehicles, they have congestion zones. There's just so much innovation happening. What I don't think we have enough of is just some platforms to maybe share lessons learned. And one of the ones that sticks in my mind, and I think they did win that award, is a company. I'm going to say the name of one company, but I'm sure there are many others. And Rome is doing fantastic work. But this one is interesting because it's a model in which so they decided to be very gender focused as well. Why does it have to be men who are operating these vehicles? Why not women? So it's something called SMV Green. And again, more important is the model that they train women to become operators of these vehicles. Women who may have low education levels, but once they start to operate these vehicles, they're able to send their kids to school. So they have these beautiful stories of impact captured on their websites. They have a battery swap model in place. The vehicles are, of course, electric. But that's the other thing, along with the financing model, there needs to be some of this training as well in the use of a vehicle like this. Because we do hear, there is that, unfamiliarity with the type of vehicle, the skepticism about how reliable it would be. That is a deterrent to adoption as well. So the more awareness you create, around some of these great models that are already functioning around the world, Rome and others, the better it is. One more bright spot, I'll say, so now zooming out many levels is, a conference like this. Just connecting back to where we're sitting, right? And you mentioned the word transition a couple of times. You hear just transitions around this conference a lot with the whole climate finance, announcements being made and countries having commitments that they make to reduce emissions and to meet targets, Paris targets and so on. This right here, the 2- and 3-wheeler opportunity is like one of the most effective ways, the most effective sectors to intervene in my view, to really facilitate that just transition. So at a very high policy level and global finance level, we just need to start tapping into these, these decisions that are being announced at a conference like this and making sure they get operationalized on the ground.
Thank you for that, Anjali. And thinking about the different user groups, Rajal, you had mentioned the duty cycle, the 120 kilometers per day for commercial service, but then thinking about as we sell to, say, women and the use case for taking kids to school, how the bikes are built for that purpose or multiple purposes as they're likely used for throughout their day. Seems so critical. And also, I appreciate, Anjali, you calling out the need for platforms for sharing and lessons learned. That seems so critical. Seems like something WRI and UNEP would be very good at, I should think. There's a great opportunity there. Speaking of UNEP, Rob, coming to you, bright spots that you're seeing. What are the opportunities? Where are pilots happening at scale that you're really excited about?
Well, first I wanted to quickly comment, Anjali, because I think the socioeconomic issue is so important. We're talking about very low income people. We're talking about people that have no access to finance. You talk about gender. In Nairobi, there's now a motorcycle taxi fleet operated by women, only for women. Why? Because when you get onto a motorcycle, you have to hold on. And not all women find that comfortable. And so a group of women started a motorcycle taxi fleet just for women only. And it goes very well. So the socioeconomic issues here are very, very important, and I think are make or break when it comes to the introduction of electric 2- and 3-wheelers. Now, to come to your question, I actually think we, maybe not 100%, but if not 95%, are out of the piloting phase. Rome is not piloting. Rome is upscaling. So we've done with the piloting. We recognize that, and you hinted to it, that there is no one size that fits all. Swapping or not, leasing or not, ownership or not, there will be different models for different operators, for different usage patterns. Maybe individuals don't need swapping. So we need to be cognizant of that and make sure we have flexibility in the products that we serve. But we're out of the piloting phase. We also don't have the luxury to keep piloting. We need in the next 5 years to get a world committed to switch over. In the next 10 years, we should not producing any petrol motorcycles anymore. That's what we need. And I think all the stars are aligned. Environmentally, climate, air quality, cost. It's just how we facilitate this, the financing mechanisms, the de-risking. We can do it. So we play, I think, as United Nations Environment Programme, a leading role. We're supporting from Vietnam to Kenya to Peru programs that are looking into this. But obviously, in the end, it will happen through the private sector. It will happen through consumers buying products. So we can go as far with governments, creating the right environments, hoping to get the finances on board, but then we need to have an initiative like we've heard today that will pick it up and supply the market with a product that I'm 100% sure is a much more premium and much more superior product than the internal combustion engine motorcycle that we have now.
The four-wheel space has used the policy mechanisms of CO2 regulations and requirements on auto manufacturers and ZEV mandates to create four-wheel ZEV markets. Are similar mechanisms needed in the two-wheel space?
Yes. So what we need a courageous government that are now seeing that these products are good. These products can be generated, can generate green jobs locally, and need to take the leap front, the next step, and start making supply side criteria. Yesterday, I think we heard the Kenyan president say from 2030 onwards, no more fossil fuel use for us. We need now political leadership to say, we've piloted enough, we've seen it's beneficial for our people, we've seen it's beneficial for our environment, we can see we create so many green jobs, we can work on gender, by this year, end of ICE motorcycles. And that's possible. That's possible. And for that, we need political leadership. And that's what we're trying to do at UN. Bring the government leaders together. Get those policies and roadmaps in place.
I'm fired up, Rob. At this point of the day, my jet lag is really kicking in. So that is exactly what I needed. We just have a minute or two left, and I want to wrap up. So, Rajal, you're going to have the last word. What are you most excited about? Where is Rome going next? What are the bright spots for you?
Well, actually, I will then take this just to summarize the points Rob and Anjali and yourself, Adam, have made, because they're exactly the right points. We need information in the market. These vehicles actually work. We need to spread that awareness. And that's where it's fantastic to have this program with innovative companies like Uber and Greenwheels, having that visibility of, well, Uber drivers, each time I order some food or each time I order Uber, that's an electric motorcycle. Having that visibility on the ground encourages other riders to say, well, it's working. I can see it. What's he doing that I can't do, right? That's important. And by doing that and saving money is fantastic. So that's one. I think.
I'm going to.
Yeah,
I
please.
want to give you an example. My son, who takes Ubers all the time, said, "Hey, Dad, aren't you working electric mobility?" Yes. I was on electric Uber in Kenya. Is that your doing? He asked me. It's working, he said.
You can have dinner with your son and receive kind words in return, Rob.
That's the hope for you, Rajal. I see it.
My
It's
son was
coming.
completely surprised that actually we do something in UN that actually works. You know, he's long given up on us, but then he finds actually the Uber that he's driving is electric. He thinks because of us. So you know,
It's
there's
normal
hope.
now. It's possible.
And then no, it's exactly the right thing. And the only other thing I'll say, in being aware of time, is that flexibility point, right? The need is urgent. The opportunity is even bigger. There will be multiple business models that emerge onto this. Our role as Rome is to provide the ability for operators, for users to have that flexibility. If you believe as a corporate user, a swapping system is right to enhance your economics and spread it, that's what we'll offer you. If a lot of our users, like the example I gave you of the rider who wants to take home his motorcycle, he believes in being able to charge it himself at home, that's what we'll offer him. It's very much about, in order to encourage the transition, is not changing consumer behaviors, to be very open architecture in your viewpoint and focus on the size of the market and getting it out there.
Incredible.
Exciting. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so glad that we've raised our children as part of this conversation. My kids are 5, 3, and 1, and when they're my age, it'll be about 2060. And we better get this right. And I think we have collectively left off this as an option. This is not talked about enough, even in this setting. So I'm so glad you've given me the honor of learning from all of you and your great work. I hope everyone would join me in thanking Rajal, Rob, Anjali for your work and for your expertise. Thank you for being here.